Hashtag the capture. The morning sun cut through the dense Afghan mountains like a blade, casting long shadows across the rocky terrain. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos adjusted her rifle scope one final time, watching the valley below through her binoculars. The intelligence had seemed solid, a Taliban weapons cache hidden in the caves near the village of Khost. What she didn't know was that the intelligence was wrong, and she was walking into the most dangerous situation of her military career. Maria had been in Afghanistan for 8 months. At 28, she was one of the few female soldiers assigned to special reconnaissance missions in this remote region. Her team consisted of 5 other highly trained soldiers, each with their own specialty. There was Rodriguez, the communications expert who could hack into enemy radio frequencies. Thompson handled explosives and could disarm any bomb they encountered. Miller was their medic, trained to save lives under fire. Jackson was their sniper, deadly accurate from distances that seemed impossible. And finally, there was Captain Brooks, their leader who had served 3 tours in Iraq before coming to Afghanistan. The mission had started like any other. They received their briefing at dawn, studied satellite images, and planned their approach route. The target was a network of caves approximately 15 kilometers from their forward operating base. According to intelligence reports, the Taliban had been storing weapons and ammunition in these caves for months. The plan was simple: infiltrate, gather intelligence, plant tracking devices, and extract without being detected. Maria's specialty was languages and cultural intelligence. She spoke fluent Pashto and Dari, the local languages, which made her invaluable for gathering information from local sources. She had grown up in a military family in Texas, where her father had served as an army translator during the Gulf War. From an early age, she had shown an aptitude for languages and had studied Middle Eastern culture in college before enlisting. The team moved through the mountain passes before sunrise, using night vision equipment to navigate the treacherous terrain. The landscape was beautiful in its harshness: towering peaks covered with snow, deep valleys carved by ancient rivers, and scattered villages that seemed unchanged for centuries. But beauty was a luxury they couldn't afford to appreciate. Every shadow could hide an enemy fighter. Every rock could conceal an improvised explosive device. As they approached the target area, Maria felt the familiar mixture of adrenaline and focus that came with dangerous missions. Her heart rate increased slightly, but her breathing remained controlled. Years of training had taught her to manage fear and channel it into heightened awareness. She checked her equipment one more time: rifle, sidearm, knife, radio, medical kit, water, and emergency rations. Everything was secure and ready. The caves were located on the eastern face of a steep mountain, accessible only by a narrow goat path that wound back and forth across the rocky slope. Captain Brooks made the decision to approach from the north, using a longer route that would keep them out of sight from the village below. The climb was exhausting, even for soldiers in peak physical condition. The altitude made every breath precious, and the weight of their equipment seemed to double with each step. Rodriguez established radio contact with their base, confirming their position and estimated time to target. The response came back with an update that chilled Maria's blood. Be advised, intelligence reports suggest increased enemy activity in your sector. Proceed with extreme caution. Captain Brooks gathered the team for a quick conference. We stick to the plan, he whispered, but we stay extra alert. Santos, I want you monitoring radio chatter on local frequencies. If there's Taliban activity in the area, they'll be coordinating on radio. Maria activated her portable radio scanner and began cycling through known Taliban frequencies. At first, she heard only static and occasional fragments of conversation from distant locations. But as they got closer to the caves, she began picking up more chatter. The voices were speaking in Pashto, and what she heard made her stomach tighten with worry. "Brother, the Americans are coming to the caves today," one voice said clearly. "The trap is set. Allah willing, we will send them all to hell." Maria immediately signaled Captain Brooks and whispered the translation. His face went pale beneath his camouflage paint. The mission had been compromised. Somehow, the Taliban knew they were coming. It could have been a leak in intelligence, a local informant, or simply bad luck. Whatever the cause, they were walking into an ambush. Captain Brooks had to make a split-second decision. They could abort the mission and retreat, potentially losing valuable intelligence and allowing the enemy to relocate their weapons cache. Or they could proceed with extreme caution, knowing that they had lost the element of surprise. Against every instinct for safety, he chose to proceed. "We continue," he whispered to the team. "But we changed the approach. Santos, keep monitoring their communications. The moment you hear anything about their positions or numbers, we need to know." The team adjusted their formation and approach route, using every available piece of cover as they moved toward the caves. Maria continued listening to the Taliban radio chatter, translating key information for Captain Brooks. The enemy fighters were definitely waiting for them, but she couldn't determine exactly how many or where they were positioned. As they reached the final approach to the caves, everything went wrong at once. The morning sun had risen high enough to eliminate the shadows they had been using for concealment. A local shepherd appeared on the path ahead of them, spotted their position, and immediately began shouting warnings in Pashto. Rodriguez tried to jam local communications, but it was too late. The element of surprise was completely lost. Captain Brooks made the decision to assault the caves immediately before the Taliban could organize their defense. The team moved rapidly up the final slope, using covering fire and tactical movement to reach the cave entrance. But as they approached, Maria realized the true scope of the trap they had walked into. The caves were not just a storage facility, they were a heavily fortified Taliban stronghold. Machine gun positions had been carved into the rock face, creating overlapping fields of fire that covered every approach route. Sniper positions were established on the surrounding peaks, giving the enemy complete observation of the entire area. Most terrifying of all, Maria could hear dozens of voices on her radio scanner, far more than intelligence had estimated. The first shots came from above. Jackson, their sniper, was hit in the shoulder and went down immediately. Miller rushed to treat his wound, while Rodriguez tried to establish contact with their base for emergency extraction. Captain Brooks and Thompson returned fire, but their position was completely exposed on the rocky slope. Maria found herself separated from the rest of the team when they had to take cover behind different rock formations. She could hear Captain Brooks shouting orders, but the sound of gunfire made communication nearly impossible. Her radio scanner was picking up Taliban communications from all directions. They were completely surrounded. The firefight lasted for almost an hour. Maria used every bit of cover available, moving from rock to rock while returning fire at muzzle flashes she could see in the cave entrances. Her training took over, and she fought with the precision and intensity that had made her one of the top soldiers in her unit. But the odds were overwhelming. One by one, her teammates were either killed or severely wounded. Jackson died from a sniper's bullet before Miller could save him. Thompson was caught in the open while trying to reach a better position and was cut down by machine gun fire. Rodriguez managed to get a distress call through to their base before a grenade explosion ended his life. Captain Brooks lasted the longest, coordinating their defense and trying to find a way out of the trap. Maria watched in horror as he made one final attempt to reach her position, only to be hit multiple times by enemy fire. With his dying breath, he managed to shout one last order. "Santos, survive. Get home." Maria found herself alone on a mountainside in Afghanistan, surrounded by Taliban fighters who knew exactly where she was. Her radio was damaged, her ammunition was running low, and her team was dead. The situation seemed hopeless, but her training and her will to live kicked into high gear. She used the chaos of the ongoing firefight to move to a more defensible position among a cluster of large boulders. From there, she could see multiple Taliban fighters moving to surround her final position. She counted at least 20 fighters that she could observe, but Her radio scanner indicated many more in the area. The Taliban fighters seemed confident that they had won. Maria could hear them communicating about capturing her alive, discussing the propaganda value of holding an American female soldier prisoner. Their overconfidence became her first advantage. Instead of finishing her off quickly, they were taking their time, planning how to capture her without killing her. Maria used this breathing space to assess her situation and formulate a plan. She had 3 magazines left for her rifle, 1 full magazine for her sidearm, 2 grenades, her knife, and various other equipment. More importantly, she had years of training in survival, escape, and evasion. Her instructors had always emphasized that the will to survive was more important than any weapon. As the Taliban fighters began their final approach, Maria made a desperate decision. She would not be taken prisoner. She had heard too many stories about what happened to captured soldiers, especially women, in Taliban hands. Instead, she would fight until her last breath, taking as many of them with her as possible. But as the first Taliban fighter came around her boulder, expecting to find a defeated American soldier ready to surrender, he instead found Maria Santos with her knife in her hand and a look in her eyes that he would never forget. The real fight was just beginning. The fighter was young, probably no more than 18, with the sparse beard of someone trying to look older than his years. He carried an old AK-47 and wore a mix of traditional Afghan clothing and military equipment taken from previous battles. When he saw Maria, his eyes widened with surprise. He had expected to find a cowering prisoner, not a determined soldier ready to fight. Maria moved faster than he could react. Years of hand-to-hand combat training kicked in as she grabbed his rifle barrel with her left hand while driving her knife into his chest with her right. He dropped to the ground without making a sound, and Maria quickly took his weapon and ammunition. She could hear the other Taliban fighters calling to their fallen comrade, becoming suspicious when he didn't respond. Maria used the few seconds she had gained to move to a new position, crawling behind a different set of rocks where she